Welcome, listeners, to another deep dive. We're picking up right where we left off last time, delving even deeper into the really compelling history laid out in Zantana by Azentawi.
That's right.
This is actually part 2 of 7 in our exploration of this rich material. So if you missed the first part where we, set the initial stage of this conflict, we highly recommend going back to catch up.
Definitely worth it for context.
Yeah, but don't worry, you can still jump right in here. We'll set the scene for today's really pivotal events and make sure you're up to speed.
Absolutely.
Today, we're tackling a truly critical moment. The Ethiopian Derg government's second major military campaign against the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, or EPLF. This was a huge offensive, launched on November 18, 1978. After their first push failed to fully dislodge the EPLF, the Derg government didn't just, give up. They regrouped, prepared intensely for 3 months before unleashing what they really hoped would be a decisive blow.
Indeed. And what's truly fascinating here, as the sources reveal, isn't just the sheer scale, but the strategic ambition of this second offensive.
Ambition, how so?
Well, the Ethiopian goal was crystal clear, stark, really. Nothing less than to, and I quote, annihilate EPLF in central highlands of Eritrea.
Annihilate. Wow, that's strong language.
It is. So we're going to unpack the pretty sophisticated three-pronged attack they devised. We'll look at the EPLF's initial, almost impossible defensive challenges facing that kind of force.
Great.
And then, crucially, their remarkable strategic responses and, frankly, audacious counterattacks that turned the tide in ways few could have predicted.
Okay, let's unpack this then. This isn't just a simple recounting of battles, is it?
Not at all.
We have a lot to cover from, intense artillery barrages and swift advances that seemed unstoppable.
Threatening to just crush the EPLF entirely.
Exactly. To heroic stands and dramatic, kind of unexpected counteroffensive.
Defying conventional military wisdom, really.
By the end of this deep dive, you're going to get a really clear, nuanced picture of how this complex and critical phase of the conflict unfolded. It reveals so much about strategy, combat, and human resilience.
The bigger picture.
So what does this all mean for understanding the larger struggle for Eritrea? Let's dive in. 1. The stage is set. The second major offensive begins, November 18th, 1978. So the sources tell us this second campaign kicked off November 18th, 1978. Significantly, it came 3 months after that first offensive.
Which, as we discussed last time, hadn't quite done the job right, didn't fully dislodge the EPLF from those highland strongholds.
Exactly. And that 3-month gap, it's not just a pause, is it? It suggests something more significant.
That's absolutely right. The question isn't just why 3 months. It's what happened during those 3 months.
Right.
This indicates a monumental reassessment of tactics and a marshaling of substantial resources far beyond what you might expect for just a quick follow-up.
So not just regrouping, but a major buildup.
A major buildup. The intent wasn't just to push back the EPLF. It was, as we said, to annihilate them, to wipe them out as a fighting force, particularly in those central and northern highlands where they dug in.
And the Derg had significant backing at this point.
Oh, definitely. Heavily supported by Soviet advisors, Soviet equipment. They weren't just reacting to the failure of the first offensive, they were planning and executing an overwhelmingly powerful, multifaceted strike.
Like a shift in thinking.
Exactly. A shift from containment, maybe, to a full-scale combined arms offensive designed for total victory. Sort of classic Soviet military thinking of that era. They wanted to ensure this time the EPLF would be crushed. No recovery.
And it wasn't just a simple push in one direction. The sources describe it as a three-pronged attack. For our listener, can you break down the thinking behind that? Why 3 prongs?
That's an excellent question. It speaks to the Derg's confidence, really, in their numbers and firepower. If you think about military strategy, a 3-pronged attack is designed to, overwhelm the enemy, stretch their defenses incredibly thin.
Makes it hard to concentrate forces anywhere.
Precisely. Imagine 3 powerful fists hitting from different directions at the same time. It creates multiple pressure points, forces the EPLF to divide its attention, divide its resources across a wide front.
And stops them regrouping.
That's the idea. Stop them regrouping, stop them reinforcing any single point before it collapses. They aimed to close the circle on the EPLF, attacking from various directions, including, importantly, from the northeast via the coastal flatlands.
To cut off retreat.
Exactly. Cut off retreat, cut off supply lines, create a pocket, basically, with no escape. It was designed to encircle and destroy them, the coordination needed for that. It really speaks to the scale of their ambition. They thought they could finally achieve total victory. 2. The Eastern Thrust, Massawa to Alphabet.
Okay, let's start with that first prong then. Launching from Massawa, the port city, strategically that seems like a very smart move, right? Coastal city, easy access for supplies, reinforcements.
Absolutely. Massawa was a deeply strategic choice. This first prong moved east out of Massawa, following the Massawa-Asmara Road, a critical artery.
A key supply line they could secure as they went.
Exactly. Ensures continuous logistical support. From there, it split northward towards Embaremi, specifically, the sources say, at the edge of the Great Rift Valley's eastern escarpment.
Why is that detail important? The escarpment.
It shows a sophisticated understanding of the terrain, using the geography, you see. Using the escarpment for flank protection while pushing north, the stated goal was very clear: to stretch EPLF forces thin and break through to the city of Alphabet.
And Alphabet was key because
Capturing Alphabet would seriously disrupt the EPLF's ability to move forces or supplies between their northern and central strongholds. It was about creating that wide encirclement, cutting them off from the sea and their northern bases.
Got it. And the sources mentioned the Ethiopians exploited the unprotected coastal plains to swiftly advance forces through Frebret, Mai Awald, and Shebib. That sounds like really rapid progress, minimal resistance.
Indeed. Unprotected coastal plains, that's the key phrase, flat, open terrain, perfect for rapid mechanized movement, which is a huge advantage for a well-equipped Soviet-backed army like the Ethiopians.
We're talking tanks, armored vehicles.
Exactly. Columns of tanks, probably T-54s or T-55s, armored personnel carriers, motorized infantry. Those planes let them move fast, avoid the tricky terrain like mountains or wadis that usually slow things down.
Putting immense pressure on the EPLF defenses.
Huge pressure. And to make it worse, to really solidify that pincer movement, they also landed troops further up the coast at Marsa Gulbub.
An amphibious landing. Wow.
Yep. Using naval assets, likely landing infantry, maybe light armor, behind EPLF lines. So you have this combination: rapid ground advance through the plains and an amphibious landing further north.
Textbook pincer movement.
Textbook. Aiming to encircle, cut off escape routes, create a dual threat that would make it incredibly hard for the EPLF to respond or withdraw cleanly. Trap them against the mountains, basically. 3. The Western Advance. From Agordat to Keren.
Okay, now let's shift focus to the west. While that eastern thrust was pushing along the coast, the second prong attacked EPLF positions at Ongern, launching out of Agordat. And this push was aimed straight at Keren. The sources call Keren EPLF's central hub. That implies it was more than just a town, right? Like a nerve center.
You're absolutely right. Keren, about 100 kilometers north of Asmara, was a major EPLF stronghold, a crucial logistical hub, almost a symbolic heart of their liberated territory at that point.
So this western prong was vital.
Strategically vital. From Agordat, the Ethiopian forces pushed into the open plains leading to the EPLF hub at Keren. Now, what's really fascinating here, and it shows the EPLF's thinking, is their initial decision. They decided not to mount a sustained defense at a place called Bego.
Begu, on the way to Keren.
Right, a logical defensive point, but they chose not to make a stand there.
Why would they do that? Why give up a strategic position like Begu when the enemy is heading for your central hub? Seems counterintuitive.
It does, at first glance. But this really gets into battlefield tactics and adapting to the enemy's strengths. The EPLF recognized the mechanized superiority of the Ethiopian force on open ground.
Tanks again?
Tanks, armored vehicles, superior artillery. They knew engaging directly on those open plains would be a losing battle. Extremely heavy casualties, probably still end in a forced retreat.
So, better to pull back.
Better to make a pragmatic, preemptive withdrawal. Conserve forces, avoid those massive losses. Their goal wasn't to hold every inch of ground. It was to establish stronger, more defensible positions around Keren itself, where the terrain might offer more advantages against the Ethiopian armor.
Fight on more favorable terms. Preserve their fighting force.
Exactly. Prioritize their fighters and flexibility over holding a specific spot. It's a classic sign of effective guerrilla warfare against a bigger power, that willingness to yield ground strategically.
But even Keren, their central hub, even that proved hard to hold. The sources suggest they couldn't maintain their lines there for long.
That's right. Keren soon proved untenable, which tells you something about the sheer intensity of the Ethiopian attack. The pressure was immense, sustained, overwhelming.
Breaking through even prepared defenses.
Even with the tactical withdrawals and preparations, the sheer force artillery armor meant the EPLF couldn't hold Keren indefinitely without catastrophic losses. So, another calculated move.
Not getting encircled.
Right. Rather than being encircled or annihilated, they pulled back again, further north, to Denphalum, with the explicit intention to regroup, reorganize, and try to halt the advance there, hopefully on better terms.
So this repeated withdrawal. Begu, then Keren, then Kenphalum. It's a pattern.
A very disciplined pattern. Shows a consistent effort to preserve their fighting capacity above all else. Sacrifice territory for long-term survival and effectiveness. Remarkable adaptability under fire. For the central hammer blow, the Battle of Adi Yakob.
Okay, so while those two prongs were stretching the EPLF on the flanks, the main event, the biggest punch, seems to have been that third prong, striking directly at the EPLF's Adi Yakob defenses, just northwest of Asmara, the capital.
Definitely the core, the hammer blow of the offensive, aimed right at a key EPLF defensive position, strategically close to Asmara, threatening the heart of their territory.
And the fighting started quickly there, November 21st, just a few days after the main offensive began.
Right, indicating it was a high-priority target. The description from the sources is, well, it's vivid, stark. After an intense artillery barrage designed to soften them up, disorient them.
The standard opening move.
Standard, but likely massive here. Then the Ethiopians executed what the sources call a blitzkrieg move.
Blitzkrieg. Like lightning war.
Evokes that, doesn't it? Signifying a rapid, overwhelming, coordinated, combined arms assault. Tanks leading the charge, T-54s, T-55s probably, wave after wave, supported closely by motorized infantry, continuous artillery fire, breaching the EPLF trenches.
Overwhelming force for a quick breakthrough.
Exactly. Exploiting the shock effect. The artillery pins down defenders, tanks punch through where infantry might struggle, prevents a coherent response.
And the sources paint a really grim picture of the fighting. Burying alive EPLF fighters who stood their ground heroically. That emphasizes the ferocity, the desperation.
It does, the sheer brutality of the assault and the courageous resistance. But Adi Yakob fell, and that must have been a crushing blow for the EPLF. Initially, at least.
A major loss of ground, casualties, a psychological hit.
Absolutely. The fall of Adi Yakob was a major Ethiopian victory, a very significant setback for the EPLF. It showed the raw power of the Ethiopian military when it was concentrated and deployed effectively, overcoming even heroic defense.
And the image of fighters buried alive. That speaks volumes about the intensity.
It really does. The sheer volume of explosions, trenches collapsing, it had a profound psychological impact, sure. But more importantly, strategically, it forced the EPLF into a critical, immediate reassessment, considering Adi Yakob, considering the pressure on the other fronts.
A turning point.
It became a catalyst, ironically. This setback forced a pivotal strategic decision that would ultimately alter the course of the whole campaign. They had to decide, fast. Keep holding ground at unsustainable cost, or adapt their entire strategy. 5. EPLF's calculated retreat and counteroffensives, the turning point.
So Adi Yakob lost, the west pushing towards Keren, the east advancing rapidly. It really looked like the Ethiopians were on track to achieve that goal, annihilate the EPLF. The picture looked bleak for them.
Dire, absolutely dire.
What did they do? Did they just keep retreating in disarray, or was there a fundamental shift?
This is where it gets really interesting, and it shows the EPLF's strategic thinking, their grasp of asymmetric warfare, with the, quote, overall development on all fronts, meaning they had the big picture, they saw the success of the three prongs, the loss of Adi Yakob.
They had good intelligence then.
Seemingly so. They made a crucial strategic decision to carry out an orderly withdrawal while mounting calculated defensive stands at key points.
Okay, orderly withdrawal and calculated stands, not a panic flight.
Exactly. Not panicked. Highly planned, disciplined, coordinated. They recognized they couldn't win trying to hold every position against overwhelming conventional force tanks, artillery, air support.
So what was the aim?
Multifaceted. Preserve their fighting strength, number one. Lure the enemy deeper into less favorable terrain. Choose their battles carefully, and crucially, hit back only when the opportunity arose, when the odds shifted, exploiting the enemy's overextension.
Wow. It takes foresight, discipline.
Immense foresight, iron discipline, remarkable adaptability under extreme pressure. They were thinking several steps ahead beyond just the immediate tactical defeats. 6. The Battle of Elabered. An opportunity seized.
And an opportunity presented itself pretty quickly, didn't it? The sources mention an Ethiopian armored column recklessly rushed through the Elabered narrow pass on the Asmara-Keren road. They were fresh off the wind at Adi Yakob, rushing to take Keren. Sounds like overconfidence. Maybe underestimated the EPLF.
You've hit it exactly. a classic military blunder, often born from overconfidence, that desire to capitalize on momentum. This Ethiopian force, flush with success, was moving too fast, underestimating the EPLF's ability to react quickly, intelligently, and their knowledge of the terrain.
And the EPLF jumped on it.
They seized the moment. November 25, 1978, the Battle of Elabered. They didn't just stumble on it, they scrambled and launched a counterattack, catching the Ethiopians by surprise at the pass.
Scrambled suggests urgency, speed.
Testament to their command structure. And that narrow pass, perfect for an ambush. It turned the Ethiopians' strength their armor into a fatal vulnerability.
Right, tanks in a narrow pass lose maneuverability, become easy targets.
Precisely. The EPLF showed brilliant tactical awareness. They pinned the overextended Ethiopian military convoy against the hillsides on its right while leaving it exposed to artillery from its left. Textbook use of terrain.
How did they attack?
Oh.
RPGs.
Likely concealed RPG teams, maybe captured anti-tank weapons, targeting the vulnerable flanks and rear of that stretched-out convoy. And the fighting descended into hand-to-hand combat.
Hand-to-hand, wow. Fierce.
Indicates the ferocity of the close quarters, where individual skill and knowing the ground really mattered. The outcome was devastating for the Ethiopians. EPLF fighters disabled 13 tanks.
13. That's a significant number.
Crippling for that column's advance. And they captured a huge stockpile of ammunition, too.
So not just a tactical win.
Much more. But crucial time, massive morale boost, and vital captured resources they desperately needed. It proved unequivocally that despite losses, the EPLF was still a formidable, intelligent fighting force, capable of dealing crippling blows. 7. Decisive stand at Mamamide, halting the eastern advance.
Okay, so while Elabered was happening in the central sector, what about that eastern coastal plain, where the Ethiopians had initially moved so fast? Were they stopped there too?
On that eastern plain, yes. The Ethiopian forces were still racing west to seize Elabered, still trying to complete that encirclement, shut off the northern escape route.
And they had those reinforcements from the Marsa-Gulba landing.
Right, strengthening their push. A determined effort. However, and this is crucial, often overlooked, their infantry was weakened by the harsh desert trek.
The physical toll, even without fighting.
Exactly. Long marches, grueling conditions, heat, exhaustion. It degrades fighting effectiveness significantly, highlights those logistical and environmental challenges.
And the EPLF capitalized on that weakness, just like they did with the overconfidence at Elabered.
Exactly right. Consistent adaptive strategy. Recognizing the moment, the EPLF mounted a staunch defense at Mamamide, which halted the Ethiopian drive.
So a well-chosen defensive stand.
A strategically chosen point, where they could leverage terrain knowledge and fighting spirit against a fatigued, possibly overstretched enemy. But it wasn't just defense. What's even more significant, showing their shift to offense, is that the EPLF then transitioned to a counteroffensive, which conclusively stopped the coastal advance.
A counteroffensive. So they didn't just stop them, they pushed back.
Conclusively stopped them, actively pushed back, seized the initiative, completely broke the Ethiopian momentum on that front.
That's huge.
Incredibly significant. It meant the eastern prong, initially so successful, was entirely blunted. The encirclement failed. And critically, that northern escape route remained open for the EPLF. Mamamide combined with Elabered. It shifted the whole strategic picture. 8. The strategic withdrawal to Sahel. A new chapter.
So, having blunted this massive three-pronged offensive at key points like Elabered and Mamamide, stopping the annihilation attempt, what was the EPLF's next big move? Did they try to hold that ground, or was there something else?
Having blunted the offensive, shown their resilience, their capability, the EPLF made another incredibly important strategic decision, one that really speaks to their long-term vision.
Okay.
They chose to pull back from most occupied areas, including Keren.
Pull back, even from Keren. After fighting so hard, after those counterattacks, that sounds counterintuitive again, like giving up gains.
It does sound like it, but it wasn't a forced retreat. It was a deliberate, calculated, far-sighted move, a strategic consolidation of their forces and resources.
Consolidation where?
They specifically chose the rugged, mountainous Sahel province in the north.
Sahel. Why there? What was the thinking?
This really gets to the long game in conflict, especially for a movement like the EPLF. Sahel wasn't just a place to hide, it was a strategic masterstroke. That terrain, it's incredibly rugged, almost impenetrable.
Natural defenses.
Huge natural defensive advantages. Extremely difficult for a conventional mechanized army like the Ethiopians with tanks, heavy artillery, air power to operate effectively, deep valleys, towering peaks, complex wadis. Natural cover limits the effectiveness of airstrikes, armored thrusts.
So less about immediate survival, more about building a fortress.
Precisely. A secure, almost inviolable base to operate from. And from there, they began this remarkable feat of logistical and engineering ingenuity. They transformed Sahel into a self-sufficient underground fortress. We're talking extensive tunnel systems, underground hospitals, workshops capable of repairing, even manufacturing weapons.
Wow.
Training camps, command centers, all hidden from Ethiopian reconnaissance. It allowed them to sustain their forces, train recruits, fix equipment, plan operations without constant threat of assault or bombing.
The logistics must have been immense.
Unbelievable. Moving an entire fighting force, support structures, sourcing supplies, maintaining morale in that harsh environment. But they did it. And it wasn't just military. Politically, establishing this de facto liberated territory in Sahel solidified the EPLF's claim as a legitimate governing body.
Not just guerrillas anymore.
Exactly. It became a hub for recruitment, a safe haven for civilians, boosted their international standing, diplomatic efforts, helped gain support.
So this base became central to everything.
Absolutely. From Sahel, the EPLF would mount defenses for all future Ethiopian army's offensives, and from where it would launch all its future counteroffensives. It transformed a tactical withdrawal into a decisive strategic relocation, set the stage for the next, even longer phase of the war, showed they were committed to the long haul, to ultimate liberation. They weren't just thinking about the next battle, they were thinking about winning the war. Outro.
Wow. Okay. So what began as this truly massive Ethiopian offensive designed to annihilate the EPLF.
Three prongs, initial devastating success like Adi Yakob.
Right. It ultimately transforms into this series of incredibly disciplined strategic withdrawals by the EPLF.
Calculated withdrawal.
Calculated withdrawals, critical counterattacks like Elabered and Mohamed that turn the tide.
Game changers.
And culminates in this brilliant strategic relocation to Sahel, a new, seemingly impregnable stronghold.
It really reveals the dynamic nature of conflict, doesn't it? That interplay between conventional force and strategic intelligence, adaptability.
You saw the Derg's massive attack their power.
Especially at Adi Yakob, raw military might.
But then you saw the EPLF's resilience, their ability to make tough, maybe counterintuitive decisions like abandoning Keren.
And their knack for seizing opportunities, turning the tables at Elabered, at Mohamed.
It just demonstrates powerfully that overwhelming force isn't everything, right? It can be countered by ingenuity, adaptability, knowing the terrain.
Fighting on your own terms, neutralizing the enemy's strengths, leveraging your own. Classic asymmetric warfare.
It really shows that a campaign isn't just about firepower or numbers. It's about thinking steps ahead, adapting fast, playing the long game. So what does this all mean for the future of the conflict, this move to Sahel? What does that imply?
Well, the strategic withdrawal to Sahel truly sets the stage for everything that comes next. It established a whole new paradigm. Sahel wasn't just a hiding place. It was a conscious decision to transform that region into an impregnable base and a launch pad.
Which raises so many questions.
Exactly. How did they do it? Transform that harsh region with limited resources. What were the unique challenges? Logistical, political, social? And the opportunities, not just for the EPLF, but for the Ethiopians trying to crack that nut.
How did it reshape the war itself?
Fundamentally, the Sahel period, you could argue, is the crucible that forged the EPLF into the force that would eventually achieve its aims, dictated future strategies, future battles.
That's a fascinating thought to chew on, and a perfect lead-in to our next deep dive. We've only scratched the surface of Zantana by Azentawi with part 2 of 7 here today.
So much more to explore.
Definitely. Make sure to join us for part 3, where we'll delve into that incredible story of what came next from the formidable Sahel stronghold. Thank you for diving in with us.